Yeah. Good. Good. You told them because of noise, I will use this until it gets turned off. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Good morning. I think we are close to almost finished. Today is week 8, sorry, day 8, right? 8. Wow. Time flies. Yeah, you are at the right place. Sorry about that. Yeah, what happened is yesterday I got called into a meeting in the city, 9:30, and I left around 6 o'clock in the morning. Uh, Anyway, sorry from my end. So today, what we will again look at is so the core. We are revolving around our core theme of the uh, 2 week program, right? Training program. What are we trying to address? We are trying to address what, how, and why of critical minerals, right? So in that we have extensively talked about what are critical minerals, right? And we have been addressing why they are critical minerals, right? And how they are critical minerals. So as we are discussing various topics, we are attempting to kind of address the same, and then also seeing how can we de-risk some of the supply chains, right? And when I spoke of the agent-based modeling that we pioneered at Monash, do you remember what is agent-based model? And there are other models which are MCDA models. Is somewhat MCDA. Can someone tell me what is MCDA? High substitution, yeah, substitution, substitution, substitution. Yeah, excellent. Companions, right? Companion metals, hitchhiker metals are byproduct metals, right? That's also another important reason why they are critical. What else? Price, volatility of price. See, you want to start a business, looking at something, okay, just imagine you want to start a restaurant, let's say, in Sangareddy. And then whenever you want to do that, first of all, you will do a proper market study, right? Market research, wherein you will understand who are the other players who are running restaurants in that, and what is the market size. If you look at, how many people are going out on a day-to-day basis, or on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis. And then, is there something missing in the current offering? People are not getting the taste that they. So these would be some of your key considerations, right? And also the price would be an important attribute. Exactly. So sovereign interference. So these are the very, very key issues when it comes to the critical minerals issues around the flaws are concerned. So in a market structure like India or China, where or even most Southeast Asia, where majority of the market is controlled still by governments. Governments are still in business, right? For example, if you look at Coal India Limited, have you heard of Coal India Limited? CIL. Have you heard of any other subsidiaries of Coal India Limited? A couple of names. ECL. ECL stands for Eastern ECL. Yeah. BCCL. So likewise, pretty much Coal India is the only company which runs majority of the coal mines in the country. Let's say 80%. Is that a good assumption? Reasonable? Yeah. 80 to 90%, I would say. And then you got Singareni Collieries, which is a state-owned enterprise in Telangana, let's say. And then Neyveli Lignite Corporation, which is also government of India, I think, right? It's government of India. So NLC. And then GMDC also got their own captive mines, likewise. But when you go into most Western markets, like for example Australia, government is not into business. Governments don't get involved in any business. It's all private entities. You can start, I can start, and a lot of people, they take leases of a lot of mining and mineral resources, and then they do it. And then they find a capitalist who can provide capital, and then they unpack the ore body and then start extracting. When you have such a, that's a very competitive market, right? You are dealing with a competitive market where there are so many players. It's like not even oligopoly, but it's almost open market, right? In the open market scenario, when everyone is mining, and the again, raising of capital is going to be an issue. Someone said already. And then what happens is, as there's a monopoly of supply chains, a major stake is held by corporations which are funded by Chinese government. They can manipulate, right? That's one of the key attribute that we looked at quite a few times. We have said it also. And when they can manipulate the prices and the markets and the demand and supply, what will happen is the companies who have started, like you and me, who are, first of all, we are short of capital, and then we eventually get into the market, and when we start, and then suddenly the market is flooded, what will happen is the market will crash, and then you will go bankrupt because you are limited by what kind of buffer that you can have, right? And hence, it is a problem. So that is where the support, one of the key stakeholders is regulator, which is government. Government as a major stakeholder, their role is very predominant, and that's exactly China does. China, it's state-owned companies. They go hunt for minerals worldwide, and then they acquire them, and then they send them onshore to China. They process them and everything else, and the labor being very inexpensive, competitive, let's say. Like in India also, labor is very competitive compared to the West. For example, I told you the kind of comparison. If something is going to cost $50 an hour, here you can pretty much do it with $2 a day. That's a wage, right? The wage structure. That's how it is, because we've got more people. That means very competitive market. So as a government, you have a big role to play. And now that kind of realization has come quite late, because Western companies, they started and they went bankrupt. They started and they went bankrupt. So this cycle continued for several decades, or at least several years. And then now governments have said, "Oh no, you cannot leave this entirely to private entities or enterprises. Government intervention is a key in this, because someone has to absorb that shock." When you are working with very lean margin, we saw the cost curves, right? The other day we looked at lithium and other metals, the cost curves. So if that is your market price, there were different players with different volumes, producing at different costs, and some people were just above that also. So if you are above that, then you are out of the game. If that is the price that you get for that concentrate, and if you are able to keep it under it, better, and more the margin, even better, because you get more profit. And when you are already working on a thin margin, and where competition is very high, then you go bankrupt. And if you see the volatility of prices, so nickel prices were $50,000 a ton per ton, suddenly crashed to $16,000 a ton. $60,000. So, for example, if your cost of production was 20,000, you're out of the game, right? Are you seeing what I'm saying? When this was at that price, you made 30,000 your profit margin. But when suddenly it crashed to 16,000, you're out of the game. And same with lithium.
That's a weighted average, at least in a 5 to 6 years of period, the maximum profitable years, 7, maybe 4 years.
Yeah. And also one important thing about mining and minerals and this kind of businesses, they are very cyclical. We say, cyclical, right? They go up and down. They go up and down. And this is also known as resource curse. Have you heard of this term? Very important. Resource curse. So those economies which are heavily dependent on resource as mainstay of their economy, what happened is they went through this cyclical, markets. What happened is when it is a boom time, everyone made a lot of money, and suddenly there's a bust. That means all the people who flock to Western Australia, then they will have to come back to Melbourne, Sydney, and so on and so forth, where they will find jobs. And suddenly, when there's a boom time, all these people will go to Western Australia, for example, let's say. That means these industries which are earlier being serviced by the same people are suffering from lack of people. So that's called resource curse. And also it's known as the Gregory thesis. The Gregory, Gregory is the guy who did a thesis on this subject. Most resource dependent economies, they suffer from that time to time. So that's also, so these shocks, the shock is where someone has to absorb. And then what Australian government did when the nickel prices went from here to here, then suddenly government came to, there's something called Nickel West, a company called Nickel West, NICK, that's nickel, right? Nickel West is a BHP subsidiary. BHP is one of the world's largest mining corporation. BHP. Earlier it used to be BHP Billiton. Now BHP got split into two. One is BHP, the other one is South 32, let's say. So what happened is, this is one of the subsidiaries. When nickel prices fell that big margin, plunged to $16,000 a ton, what happened? BHP decided that they will put their entire, I don't know whether if you read my article on nickel that I shared, what they said is, we will put all the nickel operations under care and maintenance. Let's say in that particular industry sector, if 10,000 people are employed, what will happen? They will all become jobless. One, they will become jobless. That's a social problem. And then earlier they were all taxpayers to the government, and they will no longer pay the taxes. So that means government revenues will go down. So can you see that vicious circle that we get into? So it's a very common problem. Then what government has had to do? Government has to come as the key stakeholder in that business. The government, it's in the government interest that everyone is contributing to the prosperity of the country. Everyone is, everyone's efforts are being utilized. Because human capital is very key, right? Not only that, they will do the production, productivity, that's one gain. Second gain, taxes. If there are good jobs, they are getting good salaries, they'll pay taxes also, right? Then what government has done, okay, we will come and give you some kind of support here so that you are just above the cost curve or below the, below the, why that happened? Because Indonesia suddenly increased its share of nickel to the market. And same with nickel, lithium also. Lithium was 90,000 and then suddenly it plunged to 15,000, $90,000 to $15,000. So why? Because people expected and started more mines thinking that, the China's growth will continue at the same pace. The EV adoption, let's say, the world's EV adoption or electrification will continue at the same pace. So in order to meet that demand, you require more lithium, more nickel, more cobalt. And then accordingly, people started more mines. And then suddenly, halfway through, people realize, oh no, the demand is not as forecasted, then we will reduce our manufacturing. When you reduce your manufacturing, everything else will go down, right? I'll need little of lithium, little of nickel, little of everything. And accordingly, number of mines got closed down. Then a lot of people who invested in these shares, they lost the money. So government as a key stakeholder then realized, okay, now I need to do some interventions. Same with Coal India, same with NTPC, same with anyone, any public sector undertaking. And I told you the case of Singareni Collieries, where it was almost declared as a sick industry and was closing down. And then suddenly there was a revamp of that. Right? So now let's discuss. Let's look at what governments have done or what governments are intending to do, at least. So again, no matter whether this mineral is this or that, governments will never get into business in a Western setting, in Australia or in the United States or Canada or Europe. What can governments do? They can come and give some tax incentives, or they can give royalty exemptions, which will be a major one because we calculated royalty, right, the other day. So that's a major, but still not enough. Still, China can crash you. They can bring you to the ground, right? Because they've got such a huge market power, right? So, in order to do that, what governments have done is, now I don't know whether you read my article on stockpiling. Yeah, what stockpiling is?
Storage.
Storage. And stockpiling is age-old concept. India used to do, US used to do. These are very strategic elements because you cannot depend on key ingredients for your defense on someone external sources, and that too from an adversary. If it is a friendly country, that's okay. And that's why now we are talking of two things. One is reliable, ethically sourced supply chains, reliable suppliers and ethically sourced supply chains. You don't want to use child labor. Like, there's a lot written about cobalt in DRC. What is DRC? A lot of child labor was being used. It's not ethical, right? If you're using a Tesla car that has a cobalt that is sourced from employing child labor, so where are the ethics, human ethics, right? So from that point, what happens is the governments now have put money behind. If you are a producer, if you are producing when the prices are high, if the prices go down, so I will set a price at which I buy from you. So you are not at risk. You will set a price. So your cost of production is, let's say, this. And if that is your margin that you're going to require, and if that is the market price, I will buy lithium of you at that price, if that is a market price. And then what I'll do as a government, I'll keep that as a stockpile. And Australia is looked upon as a reliable, sustainable, ethically sourced supply of critical minerals. What they're trying to do is they're providing that to supply to their partners, allies, right? So a lot of European countries who do not have sufficiency of many raw materials, they depend on Australia. America is, as a major FDI investor in Australia, about 25% of FDIs in Australia comes from United States. And now India is also being looked upon because now Indian mining companies are looking to Australia to secure, the other day someone said that, Kabil, Professor Sapna madam said, right? Kabil is now securing leases of some of this important critical raw material. Kabil is a joint venture of 3 or 4 public sector undertakings. And now even Coal India has been tasked, because Coal India is a cash-rich company. It's about 50 billion US dollar company. They've got huge cash capital. So they can go hunt for material. And it's also kind of, diversification strategy for them, because coal will eventually close, right? All the coal will come to an end. Maybe 30 years, 40 years into the future, coal will stop. Some disruptive energy technologies will come, will completely get away from coal. So better you extract. Now already Coal India has reached 1 billion tons of coal, right? So what they do, the government will buy from you and then they stockpile. And then, for example, you need, as a manufacturer sitting in India, some lithium. So you can buy it whatever price that governments agree. And offtake. This is called offtake. If you have not heard this word, it's cool. In the normal course, what will happen is companies will offtake, OFF, offtake, offtake agreements. Offtake agreement is what? Simply, let's put this way. Now, guest house, how much of food they prepare per day? Depending on occupancy, plus or minus 10%, let's say. So that means if by virtue that I am having a room in the guest house, they will consider that I will eat in the guest house, and they'll prepare for me. But someday, I don't go there. I go outside. So that means they are okay with that kind of buffer. So that's kind of offtake. If you are a miner producing a critical mineral, and if someone manufacturer, they will offtake some material out of what portion, and based on that, they'll say, okay, this is my production. Absolutely. So that's part of offtake. Our friend is into that business, so he knows uh, exactly how exactly it is done. So as long as you got offtake, that means you got some guarantee that okay, this is my production. If I produce, I get this price. But in the lack of that, then you are in a problem. And then these stockpiles are very, very. So defense stockpiles are a very common practice. It is an age-old practice. People used to even keep buffer stocks of even food grains, especially World War II and all that. In fact, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, one of the historians of Indian origin, an MP, he wrote extensively on buffers, and during the Second World War, how the crop that was grown in India was shipped to different parts of the world just to keep some stocks in other countries to feed the hives. And on account of that, what happened is there were about 4 million Bengalis who were to see the starvation deaths. Anyway, so buffer stocks are very common practices. All right. Okay. Now what we'll look at is government support for investments in critical minerals in various countries. So let's look at United States, Canada, Australia, UK, and India. These are the 5 countries I've chosen because government has a major role. One of the other important thing that we already said, US depends on China's rare earth, Chinese rare earths. What is the percentage of reliance? Did we say
Almost 80%.
80%, right? So the difference in the US, again, China and US are now currently the two ambitious superpowers. And China, look at the funny part. China supplies raw material for US defense to manufacture weapons, and that will be so that's a kind of vulnerability, right? Okay, so we have already said it again without putting this particular slide. We have talked quite extensively about how critical minerals, why critical minerals are critical minerals, and how, right? So demand is rising. Governments around the world are acting to reduce reliance on import. Very important. So now even government of India is considering how can we reduce our import bill, whether it is oil or critical minerals. And that's exactly Prime Minister's 15th August speech. He almost devoted nearly 10 to 15 minutes talking about it, energy imports. One, you are exposed to that vulnerability. That's one important thing. That's a national risk, national security issue. Two, you are at the mercy of the supplier, and then you are dictated by them, the terms. Number three, should supply chains be disrupted, your economy will be at risk. And then fourth, you are draining your exchequer. Draining exchequer. Have you heard of exchequer? Treasury. Exchequer is a term that is used to say the treasury. Treasury is where the cash is held, right? What are the foreign forex reserves in India?
600.
About 700 billion, right? So what happens if no one wants to trade with India in rupees? Not many countries are willing, because generally in the goods and service transaction, what happens if you supply something, someone else supplies something, then whatever the difference is, you pay in rupees or dollars, right?
Yeah, dollars.
Dollars. So then that 600 will go to 500, 500 will go to. So they said, if we do not get any further escalation of our forex reserves, if you have to continuously import stuff, you can only last for 9 months. The entire forex that is held in the reserve will be lost only for nine months. So that's another important attribute. So that's reliance of imports. Then introducing industrial policies, tax incentives, direct funding, and loan programs. So, for example, when you look at uh, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, or the Critical Minerals Fund that Australian government has put $4 billion, so that is mainly to provide loan, because in a typical market, open market, what will happen is if you start a company, you will when you start putting it on stock exchange, when IPO, what is IPO?
Initial public
Offer. Then people start buying shares of your market, and that's how you raise the capital. That's called, one, you can borrow loans. The other one is equity capital, we call, right? Equity. You buy equity into that company, right? So because of the perceived risk in the critical minerals, not many people are willing to invest into the companies. I'll tell you a couple of examples of Iluka, one of the rare earth companies in Australia, Iluka Resources. Government has put substantial money into it, almost 1.5 billion. Still, it's not getting off the ground. And there's so much that taxpayer money can go into, right? And why shareholders are not happy? But there are a lot of shareholders who are happy to buy shares of copper, iron ore, lead, zinc, and so on and so forth, because they are established. For certain, even if partially they go down, they'll come back. But most critical minerals suffer from
due to market.
So not many people are still confident, and that's why that some public statements come from big leaders. Oh, we will buy so many, and then that will kind of increase the motivation levels, and then people start investing into that. And then suddenly, when there's a crash in the market, people withdraw. So, for that same reason, it's that is very important. So, besides tax incentives, subsidies, energy and water subsidies, and then royalty exemptions. So, in the nickel case, it happened. If you read my nickel article, that's exactly what government has done. In addition to that, nickel was introduced then and there into the critical minerals list. Before that, it was not a critical mineral. When the prices crashed, government immediately intervened and said, okay, we'll add you to critical minerals so that you get benefits of critical minerals. Whatever other critical minerals are getting, you will also get. Will get access to that tax incentives. All right. So critical minerals and materials, this is the US Department of Energy. So what happens is Inflation Reduction Act. As soon as President Biden became president of US, have you heard of a term called POTUS?
Yes.
Yeah. POTUS. It's a short form of President of the United States. POTUS, they call it. Yeah. When he became the president, he brought in this act called Inflation Reduction Act, because inflation was at its peak in the US. Prices, people had a lot of money. Again, that money was borrowed. That's how US has a debt of how many trillion dollars?
US.
You're not paying attention again, huh?
US.
Mm.
We're asking them.
Debt.
It is far.
Too much debt is bad for any country, right? So for US, it is $37 trillion. Trillion. And US economy is how much? 30 trillion. So almost 100, 110, 120, 130%. Generally, 100% debt is okay. For example, right? So then to cut down, how you can control inflation is by reducing the flow of money into the market, right?
Yeah, balance.
So they brought up, and then what happened? That gave a lot of tax incentives and etc. To manufacturing, and that boosted a little bit of local manufacturing, because otherwise what they were, US and most western countries, what happened, they just borrowed everything from, like, bought rather, they sourced everything from the material or things manufactured overseas. That means a lot of their money has gone into other countries, so that also puts pressure on the debt. So we're talking too much of economics because critical minerals are all about economics. Critical minerals are all about geopolitics, right? And then beyond tax credits, the US government has committed close to $1 billion in grants and R&D funding to support projects such as rare earth refining, etc. So there's a company called Linus Rare Earths, which is an Australian company. What they do, they mine stuff in Western Australia. They take, currently the practice is, until recently, they process in Malaysia. But now there are too many groups. They are not happy about the pollution, etc. Again, that has some geopolitical angle also, which again I'll tell off the camera. Then what happened? Now they are now trying to go into the US. US has offered under Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. They said that okay, we'll set up a factory in Texas and then start refining stuff in the US on US soil for US economy. Again, some 500 million has been given by US government for that. But again, government has changed, and then now President Trump, he says, "Oh, drill baby drill," the drill baby drill program, right? Like oil. US has a lot of oil reserves, so he doesn't believe in climate change and all that. So again, policies change.
Climate resolve the problem itself. That is his belief.
Yeah. So that's a snapshot view of what government support has come to aid critical minerals processing in the US, right? And then Defense Production Act is being used to finance and fast track critical mineral projects. 80% dependency on externally sourced rare earth materials in defense manufacturing. And US defense industry is a big industry. They supply almost 80% of NATO's defense supplies. And then they also supply to India, Lockheed Martin's, what are the other important defense suppliers? Sorry?
Yes.
No, the US companies,
Okay.
aeronauticals, defense, and everything else, right?
Boeing,
Boeing, GE, Siemens, all these companies.
but also jet. Okay.
Yeah. Is it
RTX operation
RTX,
next to this market?
Lockheed Martin?
I mean, very concentrated market in India. They supply for RTX factory support.
Yeah, okay.
Some equipment. RTX operation.
RTX. All right. Anything that you want to add here? So the Inflation Reduction Act was a new thing that has come through during Biden's administration, and then other measures. Yeah. So that's the station. Some is also spending on different side, different direction goes up or down. Is there any certifications that practicing regarding the after this? Yeah, that a lot of critical minerals activities have begun in different government research laboratories as well as in the university sectors. A lot of commercialization because much of that remains secret because maybe Pentagon would be kind of monitoring that. Yeah. Then Canada also, similar to Australia, they kind of launched a Canadian dollar 4 billion critical mineral strategy in 2022. So we're talking of government support. Government will not do business straight, as in the case of India or China. In India and China, government companies can do business, like Coal India, as I said, NMDC. Do you know NMDC?
Yes. National Institute of Development Corporation.
NMDC, HCL, Copper. So these companies, they are into, and GMDC. And have you heard of GMDC? Yeah, we are helping GMDC in a project that they are currently involved. So GMDC is now setting up first rare earth refinery in India. And they also got a huge rare earth deposit in Gujarat called Ambadonga. That's a place where they have Ambadonga. You know, right? Yeah. Yes. APMDC, they are state. That's right. Absolutely. So there's something called National NMT we talked about, right? NMT. NMET trust. And I said that they got a corpus of how many $billion? Close to 5 billion US dollars. So huge money. So NMET works with GSI, which anyone knowing GSI? GSI is Geological Survey of India. Excellent. So we talked about quite a few government entities, GSI, NLC, Neyveli Lignite Corporation, right? SCCL, this is state owned, and then CIL, and then NMDC we talked about, and then we talked about GMDC, then we talked about APMDC. So these are all state owned enterprises. So they are now given the mandate to go full scale, acquiring the leases, mining them, and then bringing that concentrate to India. So now GMDC is quite advanced stage in setting up a first full-fledged rare earth refinery in India. Through to metallization, rare earth mining, rare earth processing, concentration, refining, metallization. The entire value chain will be onshore. Because as of now, we have 100% dependency on imports. Now, this is business as usual. Even if you look at, see, our requirement of rare earth as of now may be limited, but as country gets into that, full scale manufacturing, decarbonization, electric vehicles, and in that, you are going to need a lot more quantities, a large quantity of critical minerals that will grow. And again, the next lecture, I'm going to talk about India's projected growth under three different scenarios, right? And then you got 1.5 billion for infrastructure, again, because one of the key things that I said, again, logistics is a very, very important when it comes to businesses success, right? What is the logistic cost in China? About 6%, right? and whereas in India it is 16%. So we have a huge, again, that logistics will also come into play in your critical mineral business also. If I had to take my product from my manufacturing unit to market, if I'm paying 16% just for transportation, I cannot be competitive, right? If I have to be competitive, I need to reduce my. So either I need to be closer to market, or I have to find better ways. Maybe I have to find drones to send the supplies.
That's a road infrastructure.
Road infrastructure, rail infrastructure. Now even government of Telangana is thinking of dry port because Telangana is a landlocked country, sorry, state. Like that, Madhya Pradesh also is a landlocked. There's no water connectivity. Ships. Uttar Pradesh the same. But some like Andhra Pradesh is blessed. Tamil Nadu is blessed. Kerala is blessed. Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, as a Gujarat, Maharashtra, all coastal, Karnataka. Supplies can come, and then and the if you look at in the order of magnitude, if you look at water transportation is the cheapest. If this costs $2, let's say, your rail transport will be the next one, which will say $5, and then your road transportation is the most expensive. This is rail, this is road, the most expensive. So you want to avoid road transportation. And in Goa, that was one of the advantage Goa had. Goa had water transportation. They used to have ferry boats, barges. So mines used to produce, and then barges used to take through the river network nicely to the shipyard. So that will bring your logistic cost down. See, we are talking quite a few other things also, but they're very, very important, as you can see, as you can connect the dots. It's all about the dollars. It is all about the geopolitics. We have technologies. Our chemical engineers are good at mixing acids, bases, and then separating, right? But what is important is it's the dollar per ton. Can you make that equation work? That's the key. That holds the key, right? So mineral exploration tax credit, and then critical minerals infrastructure fund. So again, through the policy, that's a government policy. So we looked at US, now we looked at Canada. Let's look at Australia, what Australia has done. So critical mineral strategy 2023-30. We had significant contribution. I'm really pleased that I made significant contribution there in through number of submissions too. So look at that. Exploration grants, future made in Australia grants, because everyone was trying to get some manufacturing back to the country within the sovereign borders. Especially post-COVID, every country is getting very, very panic about this. The supply. There was a time. This is very again important. Again, this is very important. It is not so connected to critical minerals, but minerals. During when the COVID stuck, supply chains were disrupted for 15 days. No ships came from China, etc., etc. Right. So if that continued for another 15 days, in Australia we would be drinking water without treatment. The chemicals that are required for water treatment, they were not coming. So all that is stock have been over. So another 10 days, we would have landed into that trouble. So that's a real problem. Are you seeing what I'm saying? So supply chains. It's not only that, okay, it's not only that China puts some export restrictions, but it is also sometimes, the gallium prices in 2020, if you go back to 2020, gallium prices suddenly spiked. What was the gallium price? I said that normal price. How many kilograms of gallium is produced in a year? 700,000 kilograms or 70 tons, right? 70 tons or 700 tons?
700.
700 tons. And per kilogram, you pay about $1,500. And suddenly it went up to, say, $2,000. That means all the products that depend on gallium, their prices will go up, right? For example, your chip. Chip is required in your computer, chip is required in your phone. And if the phone price went from, say, 6,000, what is a typical phone cost in India in rupees? Rupees? So suddenly, if that increased by 2,000 rupees, then you will feel the pain, no? That again leads to inflation. Why it has increased? Because gallium prices have gone up. So why gallium prices have gone up? It's not because China wants to put restriction on supplies of gallium, but what happened is the province in which gallium was produced or bauxite was produced had flash floods. अभी floods यहाँ पे भी हो रहा है ना? Floods, droughts, everything. You know, these are natural calamities. You can never know which province gets stuck with that. Then because of that, then the bauxite production went down. Then gallium production went down. When the supply is high, less, what will happen? Demand will increase. That means people have to pay premium price to buy or secure, and then that will impact everything. In fact, I was interviewed by Al Jazeera. You can watch that video online. So they called me and said, "Oh, what will happen, Professor?" I said, "No, this is what will happen." Right? Are you seeing what I'm saying? Then next part, see, so much of money has been thrown at it. In what interest? One, Australia is looked upon as a key source of sustainable and reliable source of supply for most Western countries, US, Europe, many, including India, Japan, and Korea, which also have got huge manufacturing. But Japan and Korea also have got a lot of conflicts going on all the time with the neighbor, the big neighbor. As a matter of fact, the first rare earth crisis occurred in 2010. You remember? That was due to, yeah, there was a territorial dispute over a small island where the shipping thing happened. And then said, oh, if you don't behave right way, I'm going to stop supplying of rare earths. Then a lot of mining companies started rare earth mining in US, that's in California, in a mountain pass mine. Because the demand was high, supply was less, prices were high. Because when demand goes up, you pay high price, right? And then a lot of companies came into the game. And then again, the same tactic. A year later, you flood the market, price crash, you're gone. We are repeatedly saying, so this is the cycle this happens, in the critical minerals. So hence, government support is very, very key. And why? Because Australia has a lot of mineral endowment. And then if you exploit them, you create jobs. And if you go further downstream, again, more jobs. And that jobs will enable the supply of raw material to all your friendly countries, your partner countries, and your allies. Because Australia also is heavily dependent on US for defense. And now Australia and India have a strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific. Do you know what is the compelling case for Australia and India to work together in the Indo-Pacific? Defense. Because we want open and free Indo-Pacific. Because apparently 80% of the shipping line exists in this Indian Ocean region. 80% of the world shipping, trade. So if that is locked, that's where China wants to have a control, not in the best interest of every country. So that's where a lot of people are betting on it. US has a interest, Japan has interest, because Japan also is a big manufacturing hub. Korea also a big manufacturing hub. Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, and France has interest in this. The shipping lines, if the shipping lines are cut off, what will happen? The same problem that we had during the COVID pandemic will happen again. Yeah. So hence that government support is the key. And then you have again, 1 billion under the National Reconstruction Fund, 50 million under Australian Critical Minerals Research and Development Hub. So where active research is happening, and that too fast track. You cannot wait 10 years, right? 10 years, a lot of things will change. You have to do it very quickly. Then strategic critical mineral development program, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that money has been thrown at it, to R&D, to commercial entities, and finally the recent additional $2 billion for stockpiling. So government will buy off you. If you are a producer of gallium, I'll buy off you. Don't worry, at whatever market price, so that you will continue to produce. You are not threatened by the way markets behave, right? As long as you have a buyer, you will be happy, right? So that's where the yeah, you have to be a ASX, like Australian company.
So you have to be incorporated first, right?
Exactly.
To get incorporated, we have to be Australian citizens.
I don't think so. I think there are some limitations on how much funds and etc. I'm not across the full details, but in fact, that's what I've been advising a few companies now. So, like Coal India and all this. But the problem, Coal India cannot come as Coal India to Australia, because the coal is a very sensitive topic in Australia.
Yes.
The Adani issue, if you remember.
Yes.
Yeah, Adani in Queensland, they own a mine. And there was a lot of opposition. And then they had to kind of sneak through and then work on under different name. So coal is a not a welcome word. All right. Then this is the UK. Again, look at the money that is thrown at it. Money is the key, right? Even if you want to do good research, you need money. If you want to scale up, you need money. If you want to have security, you need money. Dhanam moolam idam jagat. Right? So policy tools, partnerships, even in the Australian thing, there are partnerships. As we already spoke, there are Australia-India bilateral partnership in critical minerals. Then Australia, Japan, and India are part of supply chain resilience partnership. Australia, India, Japan, and US are Quad partners. Then Australia, India, Japan, Korea, we are partners in minerals security partnership led by US. Yeah, so many agreements. Now India is also vetting a global South partnership, because if you look at a lot of global South countries host majority of course, not much of exploration has happened. So there's still a lot more to be explored, but that's how are we tracking in terms of time? Okay. We're over the time, always as usual. So anyway, then India, our own country, our most beloved country. So Kabul we talked about, signed MOUs with Australia, Argentina, DRC. Someone said already, government-backed finance and diplomatic support for Indian companies to acquire leases. And then objective again is to reduce near total 100% import dependence for lithium, cobalt, and nickel. And in most cases, in many cases, we have 100% dependency, rare earths, 100%. So कहीं तो चालू करना है ना? You're angry today. Huh? Have you heard of production linked incentives? PLIs. So semiconductors is one thing now. Chips. Why Taiwan is very contentious? Chips. About 80% of chips comes from Taiwan. Should something happen to Taiwan, China says it's my integral part. It's one China policy. Yeah. That's why everyone woke up. Okay, let me start chips. In fact, someone was telling that India started semiconductor mission in 1980s. It seems, and then our next door neighbor, good friend, is supplying, but you don't know until the विश्वरूप जब दिखाया तब पता चला गया ना.
Recently, I guess speaking that India is frustrating the Chinese Indians now.
These are a bit of. I'll talk again after the. Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's a bit of optics. That's optics. Optics are different from actions. Clear? So now India also almost committed about 5 billion US dollars to support National Critical Minerals Mission. Part of that will be about 18,000 crores is to support directly, and about the rest of it comes from CIL, NMDC, these companies, cash-rich companies, even NTPC. These guys will go hunt for materials. One is 18,000 crores, which is about 2 billion, will come in the direct support. For example, now Center of Excellence, right? IIT Hyderabad is one of the beneficiaries of COEs. So India has pledged about 100 million US dollars to support. Initially 4, but now they have given 7, which is good, which is how it should be. But now what will happen is that 100 million will be divided by 7 instead of 4. Yesterday we were calculating how much IIT Hyderabad might get. About 200 crores. Not much for a COE. Had it been 25 million, 25,000 times 8, 80, right? About 300 crores. Reasonable. So R&D is also important. Look at why China is able to have that stronghold because of what is that? That's one, but no, which is that professional body which CSRA. So we need to develop that capabilities. Now you guys, a little bit more about critical minerals now compared to the day one maybe. I'm hoping. And all these are new things, right? You only thought it's about research. No, it's all about economics, right? It's all about geopolitics. Okay, that's pretty much as far as this topic is concerned. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break. Yeah. Is tea ready today or? Any comments or any questions or any comments? Can you use the mic, please?